It is 8:30 and we're moving in from informal to slightly more formal. This is the time we said we'd begin. Welcome everyone from all over campus, all over California, United States. Even some folks traveled, I think probably Dan, you probably get the most frequent flyer miles for getting here, all the way from Australia. Kudos to you. And thanks for graduate students and staff and who've been helping to organize this. It's been now 10 years, it just struck me, since fall of 2008 when we began this project with a white paper that I brought along with graduate students Mark Howson and Dragan Cminic to the Gesture and Multimodality seminar held by Yves Sweetser here at Linguistics, where we brought this crazy idea that maybe there's a relation between moving and thinking. And back then we had a contraption that I think Rosa will be mentioning later. There's a little mechanical thing where your hands move at different speeds. We started out with that, and so now 10 years later, it's really very heartening to see this group here, all these illustrious professors whose work I've been reading for so many years, all gathered here with colleagues and students and friends. So welcome. And I guess CDME, Coordination Dynamics, Mathematics Education, what have they got to do with each other? That's what we're going to try and find out the next few days. These two sort of bodies of work, as we engage in conversation, I'm hoping to elaborate on these ideas that, well, to the extent that we take really seriously the rationale that there is a relationship between how people move and how people think, well, it probably behooves us, folks from education, to learn and be in conversation with a whole discipline that has been studying movement for a century now, which has been completely outside these intellectual precincts of the learning sciences. It's like, oh, sports, or what do you mean? Why should we care about movement? Well, I believe we should, and I'm hoping to figure out in what ways and how to make this happen. We'll be speaking about perception, about movement, possibly about language, and trying to make these things meet. Now, how they will meet, I don't yet know. I hope that we won't be like ships passing in the dark, so that at the end of 2 days we'll actually understand what we're talking about. On the other hand, hope we're not like colliding supernovas. So at the end of the day, it's like, what was this all about? And maybe I can ask someone to bring these lights down. If you'll see the switches are going to be to your left in a moment. Let's just try with something there. Does that help? Oh, okay, thank you. And in fact, maybe we'll be more like this. So these are teams of ants on either side, one on a trunk of a tree and they're on a leaf, and they're trying to find each other. They're trying to get one to the other side. And in fact, what happens is that eventually they start forming a bridge on their own. This is me here. Here's Scott. Oh, come back. Michael, Tom, Carl, and in fact, the idea is that in order to have a bridge, we need to constitute the bridge. Yay, they made it. Okay, so that's the ideal eventuality. So today is looking like this. We'll be speaking, starting in a moment with Rosa's talk, Rosa Alberto, 8:45, and Carl Newell, after coffee, Anna Schwartz. We're going to have some interactivity, where we get to chat to each other, and after lunch, which will be here, Scott Kelso is up, Tom Kieran, and after coffee again, Michael Turvey will end, and many of us here are going to Great China then, and if you're not on the list, talk to me, we'll figure things out. So I'm going to do now something that you never get to do in a talk, which is dive directly into slide 123, just to build some context so we know what we're talking about. Because I thought we could be talking in theory here, but it's really when you all talk about data that suddenly you get a grip of what each one is saying and how it is similar or different. So I'm going to back, into slide 123, and here we are. Something striking that we've seen, when you ask a child to move their hand, here this hand moving up and down like this, all right? Moving this cursor that's here, and here's another hand that's moving left and right. We ask them, can you make the screen green? Turns out the screen will be green, the way we've we've built this, only when the distance from the one hand to the origin and the distance from the other finger to the origin are a particular ratio, which is 1:2. And so you need to be moving your hands like this, okay? This has taken me 10 years to perfect. You need to be moving your hands this way, but of course, kids, it's like one of those things. The kids there's this hand moving and there's this hand moving, and we see with the eye tracking, we notice how as they're moving, so the orange blobs are where the eyes are. So he's looking at that finger. It's a young child. This is over at Utrecht, and then there's another finger will be going up over here.
Ja, die had je net al.
So you see that the eyes are on the fingers. They're nowhere else. And suddenly he looks there. What is that? We don't yet know. Mostly looking at the fingers and trying to figure out. So it's a bimanual task, imagine. It's our version of the finger, the famous finger wagging. And the eye tracking is showing us where the child is looking. Now, at a certain point, the interviewer asks him, so how are you doing it? Because you're doing it pretty well. Wait, the next one. How are you doing it? Because he was doing it pretty well. And notice what the child says. It needs to remain in line. And he's indicating diagonally. Now the thing is, he's indicating a line that's like that. Okay? Now the thing is, at that point the interviewer doesn't yet have real-time access to the eye tracking. The interviewer doesn't know what he's saying. It's like, I'm doing the line, and she's like, yeah, sure, kid, you're doing it in the line. It's only later that we start understanding what is going on. Because what this child is actually doing, if you look now, you'll notice he's getting better and keeping it green. He is looking here. He's not looking at his finger, not looking at the other finger. Something about this place is attracting. It could be that it's just like juggling. You look in the middle to get peripheral vision. And we don't know. This is part of the conversation we're having here. Something happens. This point is somehow attractive to the child in order to perform this. And we're seeing this over and over and over. It turns out that the line is this line. The child is looking either at this line or sometimes at a point, what we call the Cartesian point, that is closing off the rectangle. That means that this stuff that is, as you see, it's proto-mathematical stuff. It's either this line, so that as the finger goes up, we have a right angle triangle that's dilating, or it's this point, the Cartesian point, which is growing, closing the rectangle. Somehow, looking at that spot is enabling the child to move better. So if you look at my hands, if you imagine a line between my fingers, my task changes from moving this hand and moving that hand. Now I'm moving a line. It's phenomenologically present for me. It's a real thing that is here between my hands. I'm moving this line, making sure that this line moves across, keeping it the same. So somehow this thing which we came to call an attentional anchor through the work with Dan and Raul Sanchez Garcia, somehow this particular way of looking at attending to the world collapses this and that, which are just untenable, collapses into one thing. It collapses into one task of moving the line. And as we see later, and as you already see, the child can speak about it, and in post-tests, the child can start, and current studies at Utrecht, using paper and pencil. The child is drawing this line and dilating triangles or closing the rectangle and speak about it as a bona fide actual thing that they can symbolize and measure and discuss and elaborate. So it begins spontaneously. We had never anticipated this diagonal line. At the beginning, it's like, what the heck are these kids doing? But we see it over and over, that this thing emerges, and it emerges as a spontaneous, practical solution to the problem of coordinating two movements. It enables the coordination. It creates a new affordance. It now affords this movement, which it did not before. And so to the extent, once again, that movement begets and genders thought, cognitive structures, concepts, etc., it is really important for us to understand how these things work, to understand how it first occurs to the child, to understand why they are referring back to the origin as some kind of, we don't know why, nobody told them to do that. Somehow we are getting these structures and we don't completely understand our data, but we do understand that it's related to how movements become these sensory motor schemes. They become these capacities that give rise to mathematical ideas through conversation with cultural agent who give them names and give them a structure. So that is the kind of things we'll be speaking about, and I'm about to turn over to Rosa. And so without much ado, welcome again, and let the games begin. Okay. Thank you.